and press record on GarageBand, and it seems to be going pretty well over there. I'm going to get going live here on Instagram. What's up, Instagram? Now we're live. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Instagram. I'm getting connected on my laptop. I've got the gain knob cranked like a fool who doesn't know how to do audio engineering. The pop filter's being a little troublesome today. Let's get the cameras fired up and let's get into this. Okay, get the GoPro fired up. Let's do some time lapses. Sure. We'll just do some time lapses today. Hi, Aunt Kathy. Thanks for tuning in. Just getting the cameras fired up here. Our usual routine. Get the notes open so that we have something to talk about. We'll open this wide up. That's the good. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay. Yeah. It's always the headphones. It's always the headphones in this studio. Okay. Do. All right. Thanks to everyone tuning in on the live stream. You can also find this on YouTube. Like I said, I've been working on, that's me messing with the pop filter. It's being temperamental today. I don't like it. Anyway, you can, there we go. You can also catch video highlights of Creative Crunch on YouTube as well as the uninterrupted full stream. Since Instagram has a timer, I'm only allowed to kind of broadcast an hour every week there and really get good reach on it and get good engagement. Yeah. Well, so, let's get into this. Welcome to Creative Crunch. I'm your host, Curtis Tucker, and today we're going to be talking about Facebook stock taking a dive. We've been talking about stock on this podcast for a couple of episodes now, and so this is kind of like our first big event together. And it's interesting that it happens right smack in the arts industry, kind of social media, publicly traded companies vibes, with Zuckerberg losing like 14 to 15, I think it was million. Maybe it was B with $1 billion. We'll have to look at the sources for that one. But I thought that would be interesting to talk about today. And then we're just going to kind of go off on different kind of tangents, maybe see what's new with Instagram. I don't think much has changed, but I've been trying some things. Like I've been putting a little bit of extra effort into some stories typographically. So maybe we could get to that section of my notes, because I do have some notes on that and on how like design principles and design typography can really make your Instagram stories pop and make your communication in general kind of be a little bit more engaging. I think it's been working for me. I'm enjoying putting a little bit of extra effort into it. I've also been exploring some like Instagram story presets for Premiere and like exporting video that way and kind of having it ready to go and kind of really taking those new posts to the next level. So one of my last pieces of content for CVA before I left was this video that it was a video, but it was kind of like a cinematograph in a way. It wasn't perfect, but I think it was playing with that kind of long form GIF / short form video kind of sphere. And what it was is it was 3 of the employees sitting on there with books covering their faces. And you can kind of see some movement in the beginning, like your brain registers it as like not a picture. But it's interesting because then like their legs cross, like they switch their legs. And so I've been enjoying kind of experimenting with that, and kind of increasing the production value around that. And I've been meaning to kind of get around to a lot of video exporting, so the YouTube page is a lot more engaging. And I'm still kind of considering Twitch, but I don't know how engaging this is for the Twitch sphere. But again, there's like that green screen. I just have to talk to my coworker Audrey about like how to use this green screen because it's in the videos. I just don't exactly know what to do with it. Just get cool angles there. So if you listened to last week's episode, you heard my thoughts about art school and kind of the changing landscape of education. And again, I just kind of wanted to elaborate on that since I've been talking to some listeners about it. I got a few thoughts on it at Creatives at Roundish Tables at Odessa, Denver. So that was very helpful. And so I just kind of wanted to kind of update you guys on some thoughts about that. Again, it's about like taking control of your education as a learner, and really being proactive with your education. When you do sign up for college, like it is a huge commitment, and so you've got to be in a position in life, wherever that is, but like a stable kind of position. You don't want a lot of drama happening to kind of conflict with your study time and things like that. You really want to like try to get yourself in a headspace to where you can dedicate a good amount of time to that. That being said, when you do pick a higher learning education path, know that community college is just as valid and is a great way to kind of get started on your educational path. That's what I did. Is I was just kind of in a weird position in life. I had tried out some 4-year institutions and it really didn't work out. And I really wasn't in a stable headspace to be going to college. And so, of course, mentally I wasn't committed, especially to that 8 a.m. music class. But then when you do get in the headspace, like community college can be a nice little chunk, right? It's nice because it's only 2 years, right? 2 years in and out, you're done. And you've got a step, right? And you can explore an interest. And I think that's a perfect time to kind of, 2 years is like a good time to see if an interest can be a passion and can be like what you're all about. Or for me, it's like it was a time to like learn and kind of have a safe space to explore about the industry and like really pivot, and like know that I was completing a graphic design degree, but that wasn't really what I wanted to do. I didn't want to become a traditional graphic designer. I wanted to do something else, right? Like I was itching to do something else, and so that's how I got into event production. So that's then like that journey, like, right, like going in for graphic design and having 2 years done, and really wanting to pivot, let me like go back and kind of make some other mistakes and learn and grow and change and do stuff on walls and see the energy around that. And then recognize that I need like more business knowledge to really expand and like let stuff on walls grow, which is what you're experiencing now through all these live streams, through all these podcasts. It's like another pivot and another addressing of stuff on walls. And like the more and more I do this, the more and more I say this, the more and more I'm interested in getting back into event production, or at least having like networking things, or like really putting extra effort into cart, right? And so again, with this pivot, it's knowing that I don't have to start my own thing and like have my own brand, but me participating in other people's things is just as valuable, and if not more valuable, right? Like when I go to cart, that's one more person who's consistently showing up to cart. And I think that's a great thing. And I really think that's like how cart grows, right? It doesn't need more things competing with it. We don't need another creative happy hour. What we need is like some more like synergy around this, and more people just who are interested in participating, realizing that you don't need to make your own thing, but you can go to other people's things and be good to go. So that's kind of my thoughts on that and a little ramble about that. I don't know what else to kind of get into. Let's see. But it's all, it's really all about how you frame that conversation and what you choose to communicate, I guess is what I'm getting at. I don't know if any of this makes sense, but, that's for you guys to figure out and give me some reviews and some feedback about. Just continually moving the GoPro around, getting different time lapses today for content. Thank you to everyone who's been like sharing and engaging with my Facebook content. Part of my workflow is to use my GoPro to take still images as well as video. So with those photos, I drop them into a Photoshop template, and that already has the color gradients good to go, and it already has like some of the text layers set out. And I have some standard texts that I keep repeating to and kind of right hooking back to, to use Gary V speak. But then some other things are just like thoughts on like whatever the podcast is, or like if I get some ideas while editing, I try to jot them down. So I'm really trying to use the Gary V content pyramid. So we'll take a quick break, and I will pull up that slide share on LinkedIn, and we will talk about Gary V's content pyramid and how I'm using it for Creative Crunch. We'll be right back. Secret. Oh, they already changed it. Where'd it go? Oh my God, these guys post so much. Okay. All right. Welcome back to Creative Crunch. I hope you're enjoying the structure of these episodes. I'm kind of trying to break it up a little bit more and leave some kind of like musical interludes. That being said, if you know anyone who is musically talented and creative that way and they want to get their music out there, just send them my way and I will gladly mix in some of their audio and kind of do like 30-second to minute long samples. I think would kind of be cool. So if anybody out there is musically talented in the Creative Crunch audience, get at me, shoot me a DM, and let's get you all up in this. Get your music all up in this. Okay, so I pulled up the slide share on LinkedIn for the Gary V content model. I'll try to make sure to share this out on social, but if I mistakenly don't, I'll probably just do it during this session right after we talk about it. But if I don't and you want to refer to it later, just look up the Gary V content model. And it's a slide share on Instagram, which I think is a really cool feature. And I'm looking forward to kind of digging through slide shares because if you're creative and you're like me, you're probably a visual learner. So it's cool to kind of dig around on that and see what people are sharing on LinkedIn SlideShare. Okay, so getting into this, the content pyramid is a modeled structured in a reverse pyramid, right? So you're going to start wide at the top and then move down to the smallest section of the pyramid. And it's 4 pillars of content, right? And so if we're talking about this podcast is a pillar of content, right? For Gary V, it's an interview or a keynote. It's things like that, right? It's usually like long format content. And then what he's doing with that is repurposing it into 30, yeah, that's right, 30 other pieces of content that are designed over index on platforms they are distributed to, right? So he's taking this one long form piece of content and chopping it up and remixing it and turning it on all these other bits. And if I'm using my language correctly, it's actually his team, right? So I think we're going to talk about that because I think that's the challenge with Creative Crunch is I don't have a team, right? And a lot of us don't have a team. And if you do have a team, if you have one other person, like I can see how this content pyramid becomes so much easier to do, right? Like with every person you have that is participating in this, the easier and easier it gets, right? So the widest form of the pyramid is going to be one long form piece of content. For Gary, it's a daily vlog, it's the Q&A show, it's keynotes or a podcast, right? And for Creative Crunch, it's this podcast. It's these recording sessions that happen every Monday afternoon, right? That is the long form piece of content. Okay. Yeah. And again, everything else is going to come from this long form piece of content. Okay. And then from that, we're moving now to the middle section of the pyramid. And this is short form pieces of content, articles, memes, images, quotes, stories, mashups, remixes, rants, GIFs, etc. Right? It's this plethora of short form content that people are consuming. You're using this long form to create these short form things, right? Like right now, I'm using my GoPro and I'm constantly moving it around today I'm getting different time-lapse angles, and I'm trying to get like different things like that for the beginning, and to really kind of get a couple minutes of that so I can change that up. But then other than that, I'm usually recording video and photo on my GoPro, right? Like it's I don't, this isn't sponsored or anything, but like if you're looking at making an investment into gear, and I'm not endorsing that gear solves problems, or like makes you any much better at creating content, right? But like GoPros for me have turned into another cameraman. Like this morning on a gig, I just had it on its selfie stick, moving around the location, kind of following me or getting 2 steps ahead of me. And it was like having a whole other camera person there. Right. So during these long form things, I'm creating short form content. I'm also recording on my DSLR to have video highlights. Right. So I'm creating short form content out of this long live stream. And then the smallest part of Gary Vee's content pyramid is distributing the content on relevant social platforms. Right. And I think that's key there, relevancy. I'm still struggling with that. I think a lot of people do, because the landscape changes quite rapidly as well. You know, it's like, where do you put these things? But what's really interesting is he's included Instagram TV, LinkedIn, Instagram itself, right? Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, Quora. Wow, these last 4, I don't even know what these icons are, right? But it's like you need to be distributing then these snacks on your channels to get people back to the long form. I think that's how that's working, or at least that's how I imagine it working with Creative Crunch. So here's how you do it. Here's how you use this pyramid. And this is what I'm trying to start to engage in, and why I might take a break from like recording so much is because I want to put a lot of this into action. I have a lot of footage sitting around that needs to get rendered. I need to figure out how to render videos better. Maybe there's another way I can do it over the internet or something, because it basically melts my laptop. Okay. But this is what I'm working on, is establishing these pillars of content, right? Document, just like get it, like have the videos up, have everything running, have everything going and moving and shaking, right? Like just document. And pillars, again, remember that a pillar of content is a long form video or audio show from which all other content is derived, right? This live stream for Creative Crunch on YouTube is the long form uninterrupted pillar. Okay, then the DSLR is running and the GoPro is running, and I would maybe even consider like the Instagram live stream short form because of the timer that it's set there, right? Same thing for the Twitter stream when I do those. So let's break it down for Gary. For Gary, it's the daily vlog. It's called the Daily V. If you don't watch that, this makes me want to watch a couple more episodes. Don't watch them too late at night. Watch them in the morning to get motivated. Watch yourself a Daily V. Get going on that. I watched it for maybe like 6 months straight, 9 months straight, and then like you kind of get sick of watching it and you want to go. But it's nice to come back to, you know, every now and then, right? So for Gary, it's the Daily V, right? This is dedicated content shows, business Q&A, hashtag AskGaryV, hashtag pod sessions, influencer meetings, and collabs, okay? It's also his keynotes, his interviews, and his fireside chats, okay? So those are Gary's long-form pillars. 2, create micro content, okay? This is where creative people excel, because literally the word is to create. After we've documented, after we've just had the videos running, right, and capturing the footage, now we get to create things. Now we get to create these short form snippets. And this is where we get to be fun and expressive and personal with the brand, right? And who you are creatively. This is where we get to turn the document into something creative, right? Like, I think a lot of creative people skip a step, right? I think a lot of creative people skip a step, okay? They skip documenting. They go straight to creating, right? They have this creative vision. And it's just about consistently documenting. I'm going to say that again. It's about consistently documenting. One more time so it sticks. It's about consistently documenting. People come to me, and I've seen engagement and I've seen community because I'm here every Monday streaming, right? Like, because I'm just recording video and producing content and things like that. Like, it's starting to happen. I'm starting to get that digital stuff on walls energy back, okay? So, document, then create. Micro content is effectively short form pieces of content made into memes, quotes, stories, Instagram stories, posts, whatever, right? Once you have a pillar of content, you can repurpose the best moments, and this is what I'm struggling with, but we'll break that down in a moment. Once you have a pillar of content, you can repurpose the best moments into many pieces of micro content, right? Out of this 3 hours, out of this hour-long podcast, things like that, out of the live stream, what are the moments? What are the gems? What can we talk about, right? And then where does it go? Where does it go on Facebook? I've been thinking more and more now, like, what goes on LinkedIn? What turns into a tweet, because I want to get that automated. Like, I'm tired of doing tweet in the moment. I want to have more tweets just rolling out, right, through Hootsuite or through Later or through something around this long form piece, okay? What's good for Instagram, right? Like, again, polling, getting user-generated content around branded hashtags, right? How can we create Instagram content around that? And, like, what can the long form do, and like what can become stories, what little things can become stories. And then he has Snapchat still on here, and I don't know, personally I've discounted Snapchat. It's just exhausting having these other ones set up, and now that I'm job hunting and putting LinkedIn on the plate, I think that's enough to manage right now. So again, this is where Gary is saying micro content, right? Like a couple minutes, a couple seconds, GIFs. His team looks for moments that they think will resonate with their the audience, right, for the brand, and which gets turned into short videos, right? So you're going to see this a lot on Gary V's channels. If you follow him, you'll kind of start noticing that the backdrop is the same, where he's wearing the same clothing, and that's because this long form piece has become all these little snippets that are aimed at different target audiences, or the target audience, I should say, of the Gary V brand, right? Which is like self-starters, people who need a little extra push, a little extra motivation, right? Like want an idea, want a strategy, want a little thing that they can do to start a bigger movement and momentum and kind of rebuild themselves, right? Then it turns into distribution, okay? So this is what I'm trying to come up with, is more of a distribution plan. Once you have the pillar of content and the micro content, now we're moving on to step 3, which is distributing them across all social platforms, okay? So this is a cool little map, and I think I'm going to try to put this slide share on the green screen because I think you can download it, and maybe I can screen record or something. But you start with Facebook, YouTube Live, Instagram TV, right? Like, these are all long form pillars of content. Micro content and stories on LinkedIn, on Instagram itself. Is like writing a blog, or like having something to go along with this in writing, right? Like, visually I'm really supporting it, but I think writing could be a nice little thing to have. By the way, so it's just a reminder for Instagram TV. Okay, we don't need to say that. The first round of micro content is ultimately used to drive viewership to the pillar content on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram TV, as well as listens or downloads to the podcast, right? So, like, that's exactly kind of what I tried to do, right? Like, I try to tease. If I do my job right, I successfully tease out that like every Monday I do this live stream. And I try to put stories around it. I try to give you guys updates throughout the day and kind of like talk about who's on it, and try to drive you back either to the Creative Crunch link in my Instagram bio or to the YouTube stream, things like that. Like I'm trying to get listens on the podcast and views on the live streams. It's also saying that the article should do this as well, right? Like you should be writing 1 or 2, maybe 3 paragraphs, 500 words about whatever is going on in this video and linking back to it, right? I think that's another great suggestion and another motivator to start blogging. And if you already are blogging, right, like realizing that blogs are a communications and a marketing tool and part of the funnel, and you can really have a captive audience there and redirect them, right? Like they're already invested in reading your narrative. So feel free to redirect them to your Instagram or to your store where the latest body of work might be for sale, right? Like don't feel afraid to use your blog, at least the end, maybe in like italics in your closers as a little bit of a sales hook, right? Because that's what blogs are for. They're not necessarily your journal. They're like your journal with the purpose. And so you can share your Instagram. You can link back to YouTube videos. You can link back to your Instagram TV, what have you. Okay, so now this is another cool graphic because it shows the platforms on the left-hand side and the post times on the right. So Gary's on the East Coast. He's in New York City. So it's going to be in Eastern Standard Time. But you do it for wherever you're at. If you're in Denver and you're in Colorado, we do Mountain Standard Time. Okay? So the things like the pillar content, like the Facebook, the podcast, and the YouTube are all coming out at noon. And then the micro content is following a minute later, right? Like the micro content is following 1 minute later after the pillar content is out. So the second you're seeing that story, boom, video's up, good to go, already done, right? Boom, boom, back and forth, right? Like see the micro thing, see the Instagram story update, go back and watch the live stream, right? And that's exactly what I do with Creative Crunch is like right after I record or anything like that, I try to get like a piece of content up and like let you guys know, okay, a live stream's ready to go. Like just watch that for the next 24 hours because you're only going to have 24 hours to watch it. Go back to YouTube if you want to watch the whole thing uninterrupted. Watch the video highlights, right? Like I'm trying to push you back to watch that because I put a lot of effort into doing this and like it's a commitment to come and sit down. And so I want you guys to know about that and be able to see that within the next 24 hours before it disappears. And you have fewer options to see it, okay? So I think we'll take another break, play another little snippet of music for you guys, do another little interlude, and then we're going to come back to the last 3 steps of the Gary V content model, which are listen, create, and distribute. Okay? Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back in a couple seconds. Bye. Hey, Victor. Thanks for tuning in on the Instagram live stream. How you been? You've been busy, I see. Welcome back to Creative Crunch. We're in the second half of the Gary V content pyramid. Again, this is a slide share from LinkedIn. I think it's pretty amazing that Gary V shares this kind of stuff. So I'll push it forward to you guys and share it with you as well. Also, my aspiration is to finally get the green screen for the video figured out. So hopefully I can put the slide share up there while the video is rolling. So the first half of this was document, create, distribute, and we talked a lot about the content pillars and the things like that. Now we're getting into listen, create, and distribute, the second half of the content pyramid. So step 4 is getting community insights. After you've distributed the pillar content and the micro content, listen to your audience and find out what pieces of content resonated with them, right? When you release these little snippets, what's getting comments, what's getting a lot of likes, what's getting shared, what kind of what kind of content is that? Like really have that feedback loop in mind, because I think that's where the next wave of content is coming from, right? Like it's really about making the content work for you. Really, that's what I love about this pyramid, and like having it all outlined in this slide share is like it really shows you how one weekly thing, which I've been recommending to some friends and colleagues, right, and other creatives and artists, the act of one weekly consistent thing really lets you just have that, right? And like have that long pillar of content that you can come back to and create these micro contents from, right? It's really insightful and a great way, I think, to improve your communication as a creative, right? Now you have feedback built into your social media. So Gary's team digs through the key comments on YouTube content. You can kind of see timestamps of when they happen and things like that. And when you do that, then you just grab, right? Like you grab the beginning of that thought and you cut it at the end of that thought, right? Like if a lot of people are commenting on that one little thing and that one little spot within the first 24 hours of that long pillar content being out, then that's obviously what you clip and what you snip and what you turn into a highlight, obviously, right? And you can turn it into a story and you can turn it into tweets, right? There's beautiful, beautiful possibilities with social media now and with user engagement. The way that they can participate too, as well, is like by just liking and commenting. And like when you see that, that's what you know to capture and kind of recycle and upcycle, I guess is an even better way to say it. And Gary has a side note here. I love these little slides on the slideshare that are like just weird faces of him interrupting himself. I think that's amazing that they even found a way to put that part of the Gary brand into SlideShares, because he's like always just going off script. And this is inside SlideShares now. He has this. So one of his little off script comments is, P.S. Oh, as a way to engage with my community more, my team and I have been telling our audience to comment with a timestamp, see, and to a section of video that they liked, right? So asking the viewer to add that timestamp is really what's giving them the information, right, where to grab. So I think that's interesting. If you're watching on YouTube and you're watching this live stream, timestamp your comment so I can start doing this, right? This makes finding community insights in my comments much easier and allows me to make the content that my audience wants to see, right? So if you're digging the highlight and you want to do something and you want to have a comment and a little snippet around that, like put a timestamp in it and you're good to go. Cool. Got face tracking on. Boom, boom, boom. So I think that's kind of a great way to have people do that. So again, if you're watching a YouTube video on my channel, put a timestamp with your comment, because then I know what to turn into a highlight. Right now, I was just thinking of making like my camera kind of shuts off after 10 minutes of recording or turns video files into 10-minute snippets. So I would love to kind of maybe get some feedback on that. And really, like, Creative Crunch is at a point where it's ready to grow, but it needs more community engagement around that. And I'm really trying to sort that out. But if you ever have a highlight or you ever have a moment that really resonates with you, leave a timestamp with a comment and I can turn it into micro content. So after listening, right, now we're naturally progressing into creating again. When it's just cool that there's two opportunities to create here, right? Like within this process of content and documentation, there's two steps in Gary Vee's model for creation, right? Two opportunities to create. And this time you're creating community-driven micro content, right? Apply the insights from your audience by making more micro content of the sections that stood out to your audience, right? So after this first wave, and creating content just to get your viewers driven back to the long form, when they are at the long form and they leave a timestamp or they leave a comment and they're specifically mentioning a specific part, then that's what you turn into then the second wave of community driven, right? And then it's acknowledging your audience, right? It's this next part of acknowledgement. And I really think that when I apply this to Creative Crunch and I do a lot more active listening in my content distribution and I have time built in for that, I really think that's how this thing's going to grow, right? And you're going to be recognized. And I see that from like the few podcast interviews that I've done. And when we had Jose on the Instagram live stream one week, right? Like having those kind of engagements is amazing and really kind of shows me what's resonating with people. So really feel free to drop anything, whatever, right? Because I think that's how this thing is going to grow. Feel free to comment, right? Like let's get a little bit more of this going on, a little bit more community. And I'm trying to figure that out too, but that's why I'm applying this Gary Vee content model. So an example that Gary has of community-driven micro-content is somebody timestamped their comment and said, "My body just froze up and tears started falling. Respect, bro." And it gets turned into a little Facebook video with kind of like meme headers. And what's really cool about Gary's videos is he does closed captioning on them, so you don't even need to listen to the audio to consume it, right? And it's all kind of like centered around the theme and the comment that user made. So lastly, we're distributing this again, okay? Right now we have all of this user-generated content from timestamped YouTube videos and things like that. Once you have your community-driven micro-content, you distribute them across all your social platforms again, right? So your pillar of content goes into your micro-content in your articles, which goes into community insight, which then finally goes into community-driven micro-content, right? It's the Vayner Nation, okay, for Gary. So I really hope I can get the green screen figured out, and I will share this on all my social platforms. But that's been really cool to kind of see how Gary does it, and it really makes sense. And if you go follow him or you just snoop on some of his channels, you'll see like that's exactly what he does. That's not made up. It's not any Ty Lopez Ferrari BS. It's what Gary actually does. So it'll be interesting to put that in. What's up, Blake? How's it going, man? Got any thoughts? What's on your mind? What have you been up to today? I could use a little Instagram Q&A time. You got any thoughts? What's been going on in your mind? It was good seeing you at CART. Yeah, we just kind of finished talking about some Gary Vee stuff. So if you have any thoughts, Blake, and you want to get those in there, I'd love to kind of maybe dedicate a couple minutes to you if you want to do that. So I just got done talking about Gary Vee's content model, and I think this will be a cool opportunity to kind of sum this up. So thanks for asking. Gary Vee is like this social media guru that I follow, and he recently released a slide share about his content model, and it's a reverse pyramid, right? So he's putting long format things like his keynote speeches and his podcast. He turns that into micro content that gets shared across all of his social media platforms right after he shares the long form. And then that kind of goes through the community filter, and people in the community get to interact with it. And he asks them to like timestamp their comments on YouTube. And then that's what he creates a second wave of content from, or I should say his team creates a second wave of content from around whatever the community is engaged in, right? And then that gets redistributed. So he's getting two waves of social media content out of this, out of one long form piece of content. And I was talking about for Creative Crunch, it's these recording sessions and it's these live streams on Monday afternoons where people can tune in, and it's like uninterrupted on YouTube for like 3 hours. And then I've been thinking about how to turn that into other stuff. And so really finding this SlideShare was the answer to all of my problems. So that's kind of what we just got finished talking about. And yeah, I was just going to drink some water and kind of field any questions. Thanks to the Dream Company for tuning in. It's been a minute since I've seen you guys. Yeah, right? Isn't it interesting? And I think, like, I was talking about how it applies to creative people as I lose my audio. There we go. I was talking about how it applies to creative people, because once a week you could make art, right, for like 3 hours uninterrupted, talk to the camera every now and then, and you could turn that into your social media content for the week, see what people like and what they respond to, create another wave, right? And you can do that all within, like, I think that's maybe like a week or 2 weeks. I wonder what the timing is. Right. Like, yeah, and I guess I think that's what's really interesting about Gary Vee's content model is that back and forth, right? Like, is that feedback loop, and that's definitely been missing in like my personal branding, and so I think it'll be interesting to kind of have that, right? Like, really try to build a community around this, get that energy back, like when I was doing stuff on walls, and really have like dedicated people engaged in this and like getting content from them and thoughts and feedback from them. It's starting. I can feel it. I can feel it. Oh, he has even more slides. Wow, this has even more slides. I didn't realize how long this thing on content planning was. This could be like a whole episode. I could like podcast a whole episode about this. Jeez. What are your guys' like social media plans? What do you do, Blake? Like, how do you make your Instagram pop? Because you've been getting your Facebook thing going. I've been noticing that too. Your new Facebook page has been going pretty good, and you're sharing the drawings. So you're doing the micro content. Right. Like, I know some artists are experimenting with like time lapse or like long form video. Have you ever done like a live stream or like drawn for like an hour while you've recorded yourself and just talked? Because I really enjoy your micro content. Like, I enjoy that you're sharing those illustrations, but I'm very curious about the process. And I know because your lines are all so intricate that like it's probably has to be meditative in some form or fashion. And it'd be very interesting to watch, right? Like those layers develop. You could easily do time lapse, but I think that's an easy way out. Yeah, definitely. Cool for me. I've been getting between like 30 and 60 people viewing the live streams over a 24-hour period. And you can save your live streams. Oh, you're looking at passive and active income sources. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, Redbubble could be cool. I could see you doing like a sticker hustle. My thoughts on that is like just don't put your art on like every single product, right? Like you don't need to put your art on like pillows and duvet covers, but I think you could definitely like hustle stickers maybe. And it depends on how they print their t-shirts, right? Like really be mindful of that because if it's just like an awful iron-on graphic, that might not be so cool. Hey Paul, what's going on? Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the continue. Definitely think you could like live stream and like do a drawing, right? And then like talk about your Redbubble, talk about the hustle. Maybe like your Redbubble is your link in bio. And then you do like DM to buy the final piece. Because I think your stuff will scan and turn to and upload it to Redbubble, right? It would take like less than an hour. And then you could just hype that up, right? You're just like, oh, hey, the long form piece of content. Like I drew this parrot and the parrot got like turned into a sticker, right? Like I drew this animal this week. I drew it. And don't forget to like ask polls and questions and stuff. Like if you ever hit a creative block, I would highly recommend using your Instagram stories to just like field some questions with the question sticker, or like take pictures of like rough sketches and do the slider emojis. Like that would be a great way to kind of tease people. Just be like, hey, I'm doing a live stream on such and such date. What do you think I should draw? These are some rough sketches. If you look on who I follow, I think like at Atomic Child Design, I think that's their handle, would be a cool person to kind of follow and maybe reach out to, because they do really fast vector drawings on the computer, right? Like they're drawing in Illustrator, and then they turn that into stickers and things like that. And they're always asking people, right? Should this drawing actually turn into a product? What kind of series should come from this? Hey, Emmy, thanks for tuning in. We're just talking to Blake about passive and active income. Yeah. Yeah, and Blake, it's all about consistency, right? Like that's what I've noticed. Like if I really kind of just feed the monster of Instagram stories, right, and I'm like consistently posting on it, you'll start to see things. And I'm not saying that like I get a million answers to my questions. What I'm saying is like I get a couple, right? Yeah, well, and you can DM them. Like I feel like you should just DM anybody. Yeah, yeah, I'll DM you. Yeah, it's Atomic Child Designs. Yeah, you should look them up, but I'll try to remember to DM them to you, because I think that would be really cool, for you to kind of maybe mimic, right? Like this is a good time to like just find someone on Instagram or in Denver that you want to mimic, right? Like and just mimic their hustle, right? Like just be around them. Yeah, I'll send you those people. I really think Atomic Child Designs, similar flow, right? Just he's doing it digital, starting digital, so he's even skipping a step. But if you want to keep it hand drawn, I think that's a great little takeaway, because you might be able to sell those hand drawn artworks for more money, right, than you would stickers. And stickers could be a volume game, right? You might not make that much on one sticker, but when you start selling lots and lots and lots of stickers, that might be the way to go. Yeah. Okay, and you want to kind of do t-shirts too? Yeah. Reach out to like other screen printers, and I suggest like doing that local, if you can, and trying to like co-brand things or whatever. Yeah, low priced prints. Yeah, you'll get it figured out. If you want to go that route, it's not hard to go that route. You just kind of got to figure things out, and really, like I suggest, like framing maybe some of your drawings, and that will pull people in. But then like they'll buy the stickers, they'll buy the $5 prints, the $10 prints, right? Because you have to think about yourself. I think this is a very humbling thought is, when have you ever walked out of your house mentally prepared to spend $100, right? Like $200? You're not really, right? Even if it is an art event, like really, are you thinking about like, oh, tonight I'm going to drop $100 on a piece? No, I mean, I don't. Maybe you're from a different income bracket, right? Or maybe you just have different priorities than me. But that kind of stuff, I don't really think about spending $100 when I walk out of the door to go cruise Santa Fe Art District or whatever that night, But you can totally get me with an impulse buy, right? Like I will spend $5 like nobody's business. If you take cards, right? If you take Cash App, if you take Venmo, I will spend $5 in a heartbeat, right? Oh, Emmy, that is a great thought. So Emmy just commented that Goodwill frames are a great option. And they're less expensive and they're a unique way. And you can usually find like whatever your local thrift store is, you can find their discount day for whatever color sticker frames are, right? And you can load up on those days. And a dollar can of spray paint and a little bit of sandpaper, and you can give all of those weird frames a nice, consistent, even look. I suggest black or white, or maybe like sticking to one color that makes them all pop. But I've seen that done hundreds of times. That's a great way to go with framing, right? Oh, you're kind of doing wire wraps on stuff, man. Yeah. I get it. see a pad on shirts. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and you really just you got to test it out. And again, like that's why I suggest if you go the shirt route, trying to find somebody local, because it's all about having your hands on the product, right? Like you want to get samples if you can. Silver colored copper, yeah, like wire wrapping, yeah, yeah. Just like get your hands on it, make one or two. Like don't go over the board with anything, right? Like make a couple samples, test those samples, get them in people's hands, see what they think about them. Reach out to a couple places, like see what it looks like. Oh, cool. Yeah, looking forward to the series. And it's cool to kind of see that you're thinking about products as well as the art itself. And do the same thing for content, right? Do the same thing for content. And I'm just going to say right now, you and Emmy, right, should definitely follow each other or start DMing because you guys have similar vibes. Yeah, you guys definitely have similar vibes. Okay, so I'm going to share the slide share, and then we're going to move on to something else. So thank you, Emmy and Blake, for chatting it up on the live stream for a couple of minutes. If you guys have any other thoughts or anything like that, let's keep it rolling. Let's keep talking to each other and maybe pin some comments. I'm just going to share a link real quick. We'll be right back to Creative Crunch. I think that worked. Okay. Yeah, there's 86 slides on that thing. Yeah, dude, like both of you, like you're welcome because this is for you, right? It makes it more interesting when I have someone to talk to on various degrees, right? Whether it's through comments or co-hosting the live stream or what have you. Always tend to be a little bit more interested in engaging when there's other voices and narratives on Creative Crunch. Okay, welcome back to Creative Crunch. Thanks so much for tuning in today as I kind of experiment with talking to you guys about slide shares and kind of Gary Vee content models. I thought we would just kind of wrap up today's episode with a little bit of clickbait, which is Facebook stock crashing, right? Yeah, I kind of teased in the beginning that like we haven't been talking about stocks that long here on Creative Crunch, and then all of a sudden this happens. So if you're not with it by now, which I don't know how you would be, Facebook Inc.'s common stock has like dropped 3% since we last talked, right? Like they had this huge stock drop, and let's just kind of see what the news world is saying about this. Because I think Zuck lost like 14, 15 million. I don't know. Let's go. So I'm just pulling up the freshest articles I can on this. And this one is coming from CNBC. Facebook would no longer be a growth stock if its disastrous guidance becomes a new normal, right? So this is all stemming around the Facebook privacy scandal with Cambridge Analytica and the disasters there, right? And the privacy issues and really just mass waves of people deleting their account. And then just overall in general, people are spending less time on Facebook and really exploring other opportunities with that. Yeah, so I think it's interesting that that happened. So we'll pull up our usual website, which is the investsnips.com/list of publicly traded social media companies. And wow, it is just not a good day on the stock market. Basically, everything is in the red. Right? Like Alphabet has taken a dip, Facebook has taken a dip, Twitter's taken a dip. Yelp is taking a dip. So everybody's stocks are kind of dipping in sort of this wave after Facebook's stock taking a massive hit and really Zuckerberg trying to what the users want. And personally, if we're just going to talk about me for a second, I'm really sick and tired of just like being the brand manager of all these pages. And you would be shocked at the amount of like advertising I receive, right? If you're a page manager for your creative brand or anything like that, you are probably in the same boat as me, right? You go scrolling, and if it's a scheduled piece of content or whatever, they think that it's performing well, they want you to boost it, right? That's why Facebook is free, people, right? It's the amount of advertising dollars that go into this thing and go into this engine, right? And the amount of data that they have that can help you target those ads. You can geographically locate your ad. You can do it by age, race, ethnicity, multiple facets of diversity, right? Like that's the big pull for Facebook is those advertising dollars. But if there's no eyes to look at the ads, then why would they continue to be successful, right? And when you have a privacy scandal like this, there's going to be less eyes. So naturally now there's a decrease in advertising dollars, which is leading to a dip in stock, which has led to this like PR cleanup by Zuckerberg, which is really hasn't really been that successful. So it's interesting to kind of just take that into perspective. Yeah. And let's check on crypto because I'm really interested in crypto. You know me. I got my Cash Card. Hashtag not sponsored, but if Cash App would like to sponsor me, all the babies are using it. So I would love to get sponsored by Cash App because I just got my Cash Card, right? I just got to sign my laser engraved card and it came in the develop a crypto portfolio, right? And I can do that on the Cash App. I can start taking side hustle money after all my bills are paid. I can take side hustle money. We talked in the last couple of episodes how it was doing really good. And now everything is having a 1, 2, 3% dip in value. So again, just kind of briefly talking about that because I thought that would be some nice little clickbait. Just talking about that again because I thought that would be some nice clickbait to have at the end of the podcast episode. Thanks to everyone who listened in. Go build your content pillars, right? Get out there, start podcasting, start making long form content and turning it into short form content. Take a step back, get a little bit higher up in the clouds before you're diving into the dirt. But don't forget to dive into the dirt. I've got a minute left on the Instagram live stream, and my DSLR camera is about to die because I had a sweet video gig that paid me money this morning, so I'm really excited about that. Thanks to everyone for tuning in on the Instagram live stream. Thank you for the continued support. Everyone who's following me on YouTube, just Curtis Tucker, as I roll out video highlights. Thanks to everyone who's listening on anchor.fm/creativecrunch. Please leave me an audio message if something from today caught your ear. Drop a comment, send a DM, smash that like, hit the bell, all the other social things. This has been Creative Crunch. I'm your host, Curtis Tucker. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening in. All right, Instagram. I got 10 seconds. Again, thank you to Blake. Thank you to Emmy for tuning in. I think that'll make this kind of a gem and something worth recapping, right? Good luck out there, hustlers. Watch me on YouTube. What's up, Instagram? I just got done live streaming, so you have highlights. So make sure you just switch my story over to live. Go watch that right now. Go watch the live stream. Go watch the live stream. Okay, so see, I'm doing it. I just got done live streaming on Instagram, so I'm making a story to let people know that it's there. I'm trying some typographic things. I'm trying to do some like drop shadow action to see what that looks like. There we go. Okay, so that's out there in the world. Cool. So now there's like a little thing around that, and the live stream button is going. Cool. All right. Camera's going to die soon. I guess we'll just switch over to Twitter. Okay. So we'll call that done. And we will do this. And we will do this. And then we'll go just, let's do video photo. 30 seconds. 1080. Narrow. Okay. Awesome. All right. Run it till it dies, folks. Run it till it dies. That's the rule with the DSLR. Okay. Where are... Okay, maybe it's not there. Where would it be? Boo, boo, boo. Okay. 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 Talking about how to make your Instagram story fire emoji. Okay, what's up, Periscope / Twitter world? We're getting into the podcasting here, and pulled up some articles and thought we could talk about how to make. I don't want to stop. I just want better exposure on my skin. Maybe that's too much to ask for, Periscope. Boo, boo, boo. Welcome to Creative Crunch. I'm your host, Curtis Tucker, and on today's podcast, we're going to be talking about how to make your Instagram story fire emoji. Let's get into it. Welcome to Creative Crunch. Welcome to Creative Crunch. Welcome to Creative Crunch. Darren is here. What's up? We're just waiting for the file to export from the first recording session, but today we're going to be talking about how to make your Instagram stories fire. See, that one was good. I wish I was recording for that. What the heck? Okay, maybe that one doesn't want to load. Yeah, we can go another hour. We'll get another episode done. We will get another episode recorded. We'll get another episode recorded. These audio files take forever. Uh-huh. Oh. All right, that's done. File, new, don't save, voice. All right. Welcome back to Creative Crunch. My name is Curtis Tucker. I'm your host, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to make your Instagram story. Our host, Curtis Tucker. Welcome to Creative Crunch. I'm your host, Curtis Tucker, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about Instagram stories. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Creative Crunch. I hope you're enjoying our episode. Welcome to Creative Crunch. I'm your host, Curtis Tucker, and on today's episode, my DSLR battery runs out because I had to shoot a video gig before I record. So there might not be too many Instagram highlights, but we got audio, that's for sure. Let's get into it. Welcome to Creative Crunch. Does your Instagram story suck? Well, then you should be paying attention to this episode because we're going to talk about some tips and tricks to make that better and to get you up on your game. Okay. Quick shout out to everyone watching on the live streams. We had some good Q&A action last episode from Blake and Emmy, kind of going back and forth on the Instagram story. Feel free to jump in every Monday afternoon from 12 to 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Come with your questions. Come ready to listen. Come ready to make stuff up as we record live in our little bunker. If you're listening to Creative Crunch on anchor.fm/Creative Crunch, leave us an audio message. Let us know what you think. If you're listening to Creative Crunch on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review. It doesn't have to be 5 stars, but if it's not, you have to have some constructive criticism. Thanks so much for listening. Let's get into today's episode. Like that. Creative Crunch is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you listen. So on last week's episode, we talked briefly about Facebook's stock crashing. Interested to see the repercussions of that long term. And we looked at other stock values. So I really don't feel like we need to do that this week, but it'll be interesting to see how they grow and change in coming episodes. In today's episode of Creative Crunch, I have pulled up some guides from later.com, which is the social media aggregator that I use for my Instagram, talking about Instagram stories. And we're going to kind of tackle Instagram stories from a typography standpoint. I'm going to kind of dust off my training as a graphic designer to use some of that verbiage and language to kind of help you creative folk take your stories to the next level, right? So briefly unpacking that, I use later.com to automate all my Instagram content. And what that means is if you're seeing me post on Instagram, chances are I'm not actually doing it, right? So what my workflow is I take a bunch of photos, I filter them in VSCO or Visco, and I put them in later.com. And then that gets turned into my 3 Instagram posts for the day or my 1 Instagram post for the day, whatever you have you. That is my thing, right? Like that's my flow. And so I've pulled up some later.com guides to help us navigate Instagram stories, because when you've automated your content and you're not worrying about what to post that day, you have more time and more creative bandwidth to tackle stories and to be more creative with that, right? In the last episode, we talked about Gary Vee's content pyramid and what that looked like. And so in today's episode, we'll be tackling, right, the micro stories that should be coming from your long form, right? We're going to be tackling that micro content, those video snippets, GIFs, memes, and in this case, most specifically, your Instagram stories and how your long form pillar content can help inform your stories. A lot of you are already doing this, so shout out to my creative friends. But I just thought we could talk a little bit and really push those concepts, right? Some of the things that I think people are already doing an amazing job at are things like new posts, posts, right? When people are posting, they're going on their Instagram story and they're saying, new post, right? And the idea is to drive you down that sales funnel and get you to go back and click and engage with that post. I've seen some photographers obscure the photo, change the photo, shift it around, throw GIFs on top of it. That's kind of what I do. At the gallery that I just finished working at, I was starting to experiment with like re-exporting Premiere videos in a different aspect ratio for Instagram stories and animating text in Premiere. If you're into After Effects, I really think that like After Effects and Instagram stories could be a really fire combination and a really marketable If you're really good at Adobe After Effects, I think if you're good at something like After Effects or 3D animation or something like that, I think that's a really marketable skill set. If you just kind of create some presets for Instagram stories, it could be a great kind of Fiverr skill, I'll maybe say, or just like a quick marketable skill set is to really sell Instagram story content, right? Like that's an option now. So I thought we would kind of get into that because I've been spending more and more creative energy on Instagram stories. And I've seen creative people really teasing things out and really trying to add to the narrative, which I really applaud people for doing. And so I thought we could like explore some ideas coming from these bigger social media aggregate companies like later. If you're interested in reading these yourself, feel free to pull up the later.com blog, or I will do my best to schedule these into my Facebook social media, facebook.com/Curtis J. Tucker, so you can dig these up and kind of do some research over the next couple of days and go through these yourself, because I tend to kind of skimp over things and I might not frame the conversation you want it the way you want it framed. So really feel free to post these up, dig through these and go through the posts. All right, everyone, welcome back to Creative Crunch. I thought we would start off with something a little lighthearted. This one is called 13 Hidden Hacks to Make Your Instagram Stories Stand Out. And again, this is from later.com/blog/Instagram Story Hacks. I'll share the link, but if you just pull up the Later blog, it's a gem. I definitely recommend digging through it. You'll probably find something that you really enjoy and that you really want to use. And integrate into your workflow, right? Integrate into your thing. Integrate into the way you create social media content. So it's making the claim right off the bat that Instagram Stories is now more popular than Snapchat, with over 200 million people using the feature every day. And this is really what pushed me away from Snapchat, is I would post near identical content on both platforms, and the reach and the engagement around the content would always go further and be better on Instagram Stories than Snapchat. And then after Snapchat's user interface debacle, I really saw a lot of the little audience that I have migrate away from Snapchat, and I really feel like I'm not missing out on anything by not posting there and really just kind of dedicating more creative energy to my Instagram stories. So to stay competitive with Snapchat, Instagram has just been rolling out the features for stories, and we have a regular occurring kind of segment that when they do this, we talk about it on Instagram stories. Like we talk about it here on the podcast. That's the level of frequency that Instagram is releasing things and features specifically for stories, right? Question stickers, sliders, polls, Giphy search, putting your, all sorts of stuff to stay competitive with. And then people were just kind of done with it, I think, I think that's really interesting to kind of note there, right? Okay, this one I thought, this first hack that Later is recommending, I thought was pretty interesting. And I can't tell you how many times I've just glossed over this and not really realized what this first hack is. So when you're going to type your message in Instagram and you're trying to pick a fancy color, there's only a certain number of colors, right? Like there's these preset colors. And this is why I think I glossed over this the first time I was posting on Instagram stories, is because I was looking for a color picker, right? Being a graphic designer and usually using Photoshop on a daily basis or Illustrator on a daily basis, I instantly was starting to look for a color picker, right? I wanted a color picker. I was just like, where's the color picker? How do you enter a code, right? Like, how do you enter a hex code? How do you enter RGB values and kind of get your custom codes? This is why I glossed over it. So you can get custom colors, right? When you're picking the type tool, it's picking the type tool, isn't it? Yes. When you're picking the type tool, you'll notice like on that left-hand side is a little eyedropper, okay? That's what lets you pick a custom color from the photo that you're showing, right? So this is how you bring your branded colors into your Instagram stories and things like that. It's starting to use the color pickers. My brain was thinking about it the other way. It was like, okay, I only have these finite colors. Which ones do I want to use in my brand? And I guess that's another way to do it and think about it, right? Because then they're always there, and that red is always going to be that same red. But if you're preparing the graphics for your Instagram story, like I said, in After Effects or Illustrator or Photoshop, and you're using the same consistent colors, and you're posting it to the same platforms through the same devices, then you're probably going to be able to get the same consistent colors, right? So I thought that was a really interesting hack, and I've kind of been goofing around with it. I do like the preset colors. I think they vibe well with like the other features of Instagram, right? Like you see the same oranges and reds in the other stickers and what have you. So I've kind of been sticking to those, but it's an option, right? Now, this next hack I have been using a lot. I haven't really been picking custom colors, but I have started doing drop shadows. I hope it doesn't come across as everything with drop shadows, but I'm trying to do drop shadows in there because I think your eye catches it a little bit more, right? Like if we're talking about typography and using sort of that language, a drop shadow is a way to create a hierarchy, right? It's a way for your eye to go specifically somewhere on the Instagram story first, right? Like it's another thing that will help create options and create a hierarchy. Because normally I resort to all caps, right? Like all caps, headline, normal typing, body, right? But still that doesn't differentiate the two. Your eye is not picking up the difference as much as drop shadow, headline, body copy typed out, right? So this is how you do drop shadows. And I don't even need to look at the Later guide. So this is just me spitballing how to do drop shadows because I've been doing it for quite a while now on my stories, if you've been noticing. I think it's fun. I think it's easy to integrate. I think it's a great thing to do. So if you want to do a drop shadow on your Instagram story, here's what you do. Follow along with me. Crack open your Instagram stories. Let's do this. Crack open your Instagram stories right now. We're going to make a sweet piece of content. Okay? So you're going to type something, right? You're going to type your message. And the rule that I try to stick to with drop shadows is either white or black as your shadow. And then you can go crazy with the top layer, right? So just type it out in whatever format, style. I think this works with pretty much all of them. Maybe not the neon, but I think this should work with all of them. Any kind of type on Instagram stories. Okay, so you typed your thing. You're good to go. Okay. Now it's either white or black, right? Now you're going to type it again. Now this is where kind of copy and paste can come in handy, things like that. You want to copy the first body, your first headline, right? I don't suggest doing this with multiple lines of text. Usually like a headline is good for a drop shadow, okay? So you copy your headline, and now you're going to paste it again in a new text layer. Just like Photoshop, right? We're creating layers, okay? Now this one's where you can have some fun. You can use the color picker to create a custom color. You could pick another color that pops. I suggest like reds, oranges, warm colors could be cool. Might get some Russian constructivist vibes going there. Okay, so now you pick your top color. Now what you want to do is you usually just kind of, I hope you left that first layer, don't move that first layer, right? Like just kind of keep it centered or kind of keep it where you want it. I usually go centered so it snaps to guides, right? And I know it's truly ready to go. But you can move it around. Have that ready to go, okay? So now you got your shadow layer placed. Now we're going to take our fancy colored top text layer and we're going to move it. Usually I start right on top, right? Like you just want to get them locked in, shadow right on top of color. And then that's when I slowly start to experiment. Like I move my finger in little circles to kind of see the different shadows, right? See the different effects, because eyeball with the drop shadow to get it to move to the next piece of text, right? This is a great way to kind of create hierarchy in your stories, right? If we're using the new post thing for an example, right? Like the new post, as we've been calling it, what you want to do then is direct the eye. Now I can say new post in all caps in drop shadow and then tell you about it, right? Build the narrative, communicate more with a flat color, right? With either flat black text, flat white text, or the color that you used in the drop shadow, right? Like the pop color, you might be able to pull that off. Now I can say, this new post is a time lapse. This is where I went. This is who I worked with. This was the challenges we had to overcome. This is the successful things that happened. Right now, instead of just saying new post, I can say, new post, I worked really hard on this. I hope you check it out. These 3 other people helped me make this thing. Here's the model, right? Like a lot of us, like I'm into tagging the models that I work with because I know that builds their equity. But now I can say, I worked with this model and they wore this and we did a great job and they communicated well and and we talked a lot, right? Like that's the kind of stuff now that you can do now that you have a type hierarchy, right? And all you had to do was copy and paste and throw another layer on and make a colorful choice, right? Make a color palette, do something creative. So I think that's a great little hack. This last hack I'm going to expand on, right? So this is the last hack that I'm going to talk about before we take a little break, because I think it's a great one, and I kind of want people to take the musical interlude that I'm building into my podcast episodes now to maybe create a fire piece of content, right? See if you can knock something out in 30 seconds or in a minute, right? Maybe I'll start putting full-length songs on anchor.fm/creativecrunch. But this is going to be the last tip or trick that I talk about before taking a quick break, and it's going hands-free. I do this more often than not, right? Like even if I could easily just hold the video button, I tend not to, right? I tend to go all the way over to the hands-free option inside of Instagram stories. And I tend to try to do that. And with that, what I've noticed is just it's a little bit more stable sometimes. Maybe you can get a little bit more creative with your angle. Maybe you can be more dynamic, be more responsive, right? When you're hands-free, I've noticed you're not thinking about, I tend to not think about my thumb smashing the button and staying smashed on the button, right? When I go hands-free for my Instagram stories, I tend to go into videography mode and tend to either do a pan or a sweep or a zoom or a dolly or a whatever. Like I tend to get a little bit more dynamic with my device. And I really think that's something as creatives that our brains are willing to adapt to. So if you're not going hands-free for Instagram stories, I suggest experimenting with that, because then your brain will maybe come up with different ways to move the camera around, because you're not thinking about pressing the button to record, right? You're not thinking about making that mistake of ending it too soon or ending it too late. You can take the full time, for the full length of an Instagram story, to do some awesome camera moves, right? And do something interesting with it now, instead of just being worried about pressing the button and being stable. And there's lots of options, right? Let's come up with some options. Let's do a little brainstorm here. I love when people peek in the window, like I can see you. Okay, so let's come up with some brainstorming ideas. We're just going to brainstorm some cool hands-free ideas, and then we're going to take a break, okay? So I just Googled basic camera movements, right? Because I just wanted to use the proper kind of videography kind of terminology for this, right? But I don't even know if this article is going to do it. Okay. So the first one is a tilt, right? It's just like, you can do this with your hand. You hold it here and you tilt it forward, right? Tilt it back, tilt it forward, tilt, camera move. I can do that now that I'm hands-free and I'm not mashing the button, right? I can tilt down and show you my art, right? I could start out the window, show you the view that I'm working at, right? Show you the view from my desk, my creative space, my maker space, whatever, and tilt down, okay? This is just that much more interesting, okay? Because, what's on the end of this motion, right? Do you see how curious your brain gets around this? Just tilt. First camera move, super easy. You can also reverse this, right? Start really close to whatever you're working on. Start really close to the 3D printer. Start really close to the detail of the drawing and the illustration. Start really close to your keyboard, to the computer screen, what have you. Tilt back, just with the flick of the wrist. Flick of the wrist, tilt, tilt, done. Okay? Put your elbow on the table right now, wherever you're working. Fire up your Instagram story, and let's try a tilt. Point it down at whatever you're doing. Press hands-free, right? Hands-free. Press the button. Flick of the wrist. Just tilt it up. Nothing more than that, okay? I think that's a great way to go hands-free and do that. Panning. Pretty similar to a tilt. Instead of going up and down, now we're going left to right, okay? Panning, left to right, right to left, pan, 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 all day pan, right? People naturally do this when they're at venues, when they're at places with crowds, when you're up high, whatever you want to do. A pan is usually a great way to capture a room in an Instagram story, right? You're already doing this one. People pan all the time. This is a pretty popular thing. Pan, pan, okay? Next time you're at an art opening, next time you're at a gallery. Odessa, Denver did a really good job of this. Like when we were all hanging out at CART, Corianne just panned the crowd in the back and tagged everyone. Even went the extra step and like pinned it to people. I do not know how their phone didn't melt in their hand trying to tag 9 people, but it didn't, right? Pan, showed us the whole thing, sense of space. Pan, pan, pan. Cool thing about pan, just like I said, get a couple steps up, right? How can you get higher up and do a cool pan, right? Can you go halfway up a staircase and pan the crowd that way? Can you go super low and pan, right? Think about panning. Zooms, again, I think people pretty much do a zoom, right? This is in and out, right? This is that kind of motion. This is like detail, right? Like out, showing the whole piece, the whole big creative thing, going into a micro detail, right? Here's a giant canvas that's the size of an entire room, and now we're going into one fine detail, right? That's what a zoom would be perfect for. Same thing with like reversing the zoom. Can you show us an incredible detail and entice us with that and show us that it's part of this larger thing? Can you start really close to the filament of the 3D printer, right, where the nozzle's printing out? Can you show us that detail and then pull out to the whole project, right? That's what zooms are good for. Moving on to a dolly. Dollies are similar to zooms, but your body and the camera are moving, right? Like it becomes a zoom for me on Instagram stories when like your body has to move. And this is great for hands-free. Into or out of a creative space, and that will be the dolly. And you can then also zoom while you're dollying with your hand. You can also tilt, you can also pan, go into that and really kind of create some drama, right? This is more drama. This is more drama than just a stable camera. This is more drama than like just having it stationary and like worrying about your thumb on the button, right? Like going hands-free on Instagram stories is a great thing to do. And you just got to mix in like these pans, these tilts, and these zooms, and you'll be good to go, right? So we're going to take a little audio break so you can digest that, maybe create some fire Instagram stories. Thanks for listening. We're just having a bad camera day. Okay. Welcome back to Creative Crunch. I look forward to seeing the upgraded Instagram stories. I hope you guys knocked some stuff out. If you did make a fire piece of content, if you've tried out the drop shadows, or you tried building a type hierarchy, or maybe you've tried this next tip that we're going to talk about, how to get a solid color in your background, let me know. Send it to me, mention me in the corner so I can see it. I'd love to like share the stories out. Love to share your stories out and kind of see what you guys are up to and see what your creative brains do with this, and how you're turning these long form pillar contents into micro content, and how you're making a more engaging Instagram story. So yeah, tag me in those, send them my way, at Curtis on Instagram. Thanks so much. I look forward to it. So let's get into this next tip. This next tip is how to get a solid color. And I haven't tried this out, but it looks pretty easy, so I might do it. What you do is you tap the pen icon in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, and you select a color, okay? And then next what you're going to do is you're going to tap and hold the screen for 1 to 3 seconds. This is why I don't think anybody knows about this, because you got to do the tap and hold. Okay, tap and hold for 1 to 3 seconds until the screen is filled with a solid color. Now you've got all these cool other solid color options besides just the standard text things. I think I'm going to start doing this more and experimenting with this more. So again, your eye is registering it as a little different, right? We're always looking to be a little bit different with these things. And I think different colors for solid backgrounds besides the default ones that go when you do a text post can be really interesting. And like this mentions, this is a great way to also add brush strokes on top of this. You can add photos on top of this. You can add other things on it when you do a solid background color this way, instead of creating the normal text post, right? And if you've come across those challenges, my workaround for that is usually to just kind of like type one letter, delete it, and then use that. But now this is a way to get custom colors, right? This way you can get custom colors for a solid background, and you can add photos and GIFs and other things on top of that without having to stick to just the gradients or the solid colors that normally come with type. Okay. This next tip, I really haven't seen people latch onto because I think it's kind of weird. It's putting yourself in your story, and it's through that like camera button, when you're like searching for a GIF. Usually that's when I come across it. There's like that camera button there, and you can put yourself in it. I don't know. I don't think people have really latched onto it, but just know that it's an option if you're building your personal brand. Like you can put yourself as a selfie sticker, as like just a little inside your story. Okay. Okay, now this one, the next tip of zooming in and out on your story, I wouldn't recommend because it can kind of trash the resolution of what you're doing. But if you just can't quite get that angle, or you just can't quite get close enough, if you press record and then slide your finger up, you're actually able to zoom inside of Instagram stories. So you might be able to come up with something really cool if you do that kind of zoom while dollying in with your body. You might get kind of a cool warp tunnel effect with that. Or other than that, I would kind of only use this like if things are just a little out of reach, right? Like if that view or that angle, you can't move your body to get to that, that's when I would zoom, right? Like that's when I would do this slide to finger zoom thing. The next tip is to always mention. Now I do this anytime I go do a photo shoot, especially if it's time for prints or anything like that. If anybody lets me into their studio to do documentation, I tend to tag them in some kind of B-side content or in my Instagram stories is what I mean by that. B-side is like the other side of the record. So, right, like, I hope that makes sense. The A side is all the hits, right? Like that's where I put my Instagram posts. And then my B side, I consider my Instagram stories, right? Using that Gary Vee content model that we talked about last time, the stories support the post, right? And I do tend to mention people in the post, but it might not always be worked into the copy. It might be thrown at the bottom. But on Instagram stories, I am always trying to tag people that I'm hanging out with or working with or what have you, because this just builds equity, right? And now there's that feature built in where you can add this post to your story when someone mentions you. So it's just a great way of getting your content seen, right? As well as that person's angle and that person's narrative. Now they can add the other angles to the story on theirs, right? And so it's cool for group hangouts. It's cool for models working with photographers and vice versa, and all sorts of kind of content creation relationships. Just take that extra time to tag someone, and you can either do it with the text tool and make it any kind of cool custom color, or you can use that sticker feature and tap through it and get a couple different options as well. But if you're working with other people, especially creatively, one of the things you can do that really helps people build tangible social equity is mentioning them in your Instagram story. Okay, so another feature for Instagram stories that can really help you out is archiving stuff, right? Like I save my live streams. I try to save result posts and things like that, or share the result posts. If it's a poll or a question or like whatever, I try to do that as much as I can. But if you think it's a good piece of content, or you think it's a good story, or maybe it's part of a campaign, right? Like you have an exhibition opening, or you're trying to sell a certain product, or work with a certain influencer, or like maybe you just spent a little bit of extra time on this thing and you maybe want to use it again in the future, I definitely recommend archiving your stories, saving them to your camera roll, and just like having another little album built around those, or maybe like Google Drive folder, just so that you can like reference it, right? And it's great for documentation purposes at the end of a campaign, and maybe you can like track things back. If you have that over the 10K mark and you spent time building in that like swipe up kind of feature, you can just keep those stories and save them and just use them again at future dates. So I definitely recommend archiving all of your stories, or at least saving the gems to your camera roll for future use. And know that that's not a bad thing to use the same story more than once, especially if it's your right hook, right? If we're throwing out jabs and we're teasing about the artwork and we're teasing about the creative project, those don't necessarily need to be saved. But if the right hook is, go listen to my podcast, go visit my store, go buy this sticker, hire me to do this, whatever it is, that's the ones you might want to save, so that the viewer is getting that same message over and over again, right? And you don't need to reinvent the wheel for those. If it looks good, you spent time doing your drop shadow, you got your type hierarchy, you built in your swipe up GIF, whatever, save that and use that again, right? Like use that throughout the week, use that in the campaign, okay? We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to get into some more tips and tricks. We're still just in the first guide. I've been going off script a lot, but I think that's the value. I don't want to just be repeating the later.com guide. So I'm just kind of using it as a thing out of the corner of my eye to kind of see and move the conversation forward. And then I'm giving you like a lot of my own thoughts on this. So I really hope you are enjoying it. We're going to take a quick audio break. Another great time for you to knock out an Instagram story, send me a DM, send me an audio message through the Anchor app. So we're just going to listen to a cool little beat for a second, and we'll be right back. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Creative Crunch. I hope your Instagram stories are lit right now. I hope this episode is really inspiring you to just do one thing to make your Instagram story better. And if it's anything, it should be this, right? Are you looking at the engagement around your Instagram story, right? Are you watching your own story? Are you seeing how it progresses during a 24-hour period? At the very minimum, I hope that if you're using the features like questions, polls, sliders, that you're resharing some of the results, that you're adding your own commentary to those results when you're sharing them, and you're really kind of engaging and giving back to the people who have taken time to put some energy and effort into your Instagram story, right? So if anything, you should be finishing that, right? Like, don't be selfish with your questions and keep the answers to yourself. Slap that sticker on an old photo or a texture even, right? Like take a picture of the floor or your paint palette or whatever junk is lying next to you and slap that sticker on there and slap the answer on and like let people know that they're being heard. Building off of that, when you're watching your own story, you can swipe up on the screen and see the number of views as well as what people are doing. Are they pushing forward? Are they pushing backward? I don't think you have to be a business account to do this, but if you're not, I highly recommend doing that. And I know it does mean signing up for a Facebook page, but I'm telling you right now, folks, you don't have to do much with it. Just the insights are pretty invaluable. And whatever data you can get from your Instagram or your main social platform, I highly recommend doing that, right? And this is one way to do it with your stories. Who's looking? And are they staying? And are they watching? Or are they just going push, 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 forward, 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 forward? Or is something getting a back, right? Are people watching something again? Are they holding? If you don't know, here's another little bonus tip. Hold. When you're watching someone's story, you can put your thumb on it and hold and read the whole dang thing, right? Like this is why you shouldn't be afraid about typing into a story because it's built in for people to pause, right? And so like look at the navigation and like know and like see what your stuff is doing. Is all the effort for the drop shadow worth it? Stuff like that. Is the interesting camera angles now, is like going hands-free and moving your hand around actually getting people to stay, right? Is it reducing the number of swipe forwards? Yeah, and if you don't know how to do that, right, like you just put your thumb on the story as you're watching it, and it'll pause it. You can also tap on the right side of the screen to skip forward, and tap on the left side of the screen to go backwards. Another little bonus tip for you. All right, you want to throw some shade, you want to block some haters, all you have to do is hold down their Instagram story icon, and a little submenu will pop up, and you can mute their story or unmute their story. There's another little quick tip for you. All right, so that's kind of like the nuts and bolts of Instagram stories and some things that you can do. Moving on to this other later guide, this is 7 tips to designing beautiful stories, right? And this is kind of what I got passionate about. Once you're doing those other things, what else can we do to expand that, right? Like, how can we even push this even further? So we talked about the eyedropper tool previously, and it's popping up again in this one. So keep an eye out for that eyedropper tool when you're selecting a color. That'll give you a custom option. That's a great way to pull your branded palette into Instagram stories, or just to kind of maybe pick a color that goes better with the photo that you're trying to share. Now, this next tip pushes the drop shadow feature. So this next tip is even more extensive than just creating a drop shadow. You can actually select individual letters or words or phrases in the writing that you've done and can change the color that way, right? So this is another way to introduce hierarchy into your Instagram stories. You can type something out, and as this one from later is suggesting, you could make a rainbow effect, right? You could select individual letters and go through Roy G. Biv and make a rainbow. Or if you don't want to go that far, you could just select a word, right? Like you could just select one word, and that way that one word will pop and can be a little bit more distinguished, right? Or maybe the body copy needs to be white or black or something like that. Again, look out for that eyedropper tool, and just know that you can really change the letters within that writing, right? Like really know that like that writing and that communication, you can also add a visual level to it, as well as being a wordsmith. Now, this next tip of mixing the fonts is what really got me thinking about typography, right? So this next tip from later.com is mixing the default fonts in Instagram and creating interesting type that way. This is something that I've been meaning to experiment with, but just really haven't gotten around to, but really look forward to kind of playing with this. So if you look at the guide that Later has provided, they are really creating some interesting hierarchies with the type. They're mixing that bold italic type with sort of the high stacked letters. They're mixing handwritten words with some of the other type. They're using the neon as I think it should be used, which is more of like a headline, one word thing. I really don't think you should be typing out extensive amounts of information with the neon type in Instagram stories. But in this one, they just wrote the word tip in neon. They stacked it on top of a big, bold, black number 5, right? It looks very interesting, okay? So, and then they're stacking minute morning routine right next to the 5. So they're creating a very interesting typographical hierarchy with all of the things inside, right? I know there's an obsession, and I'm obsessed with it too, to go and get from the App Store another typography app, right? But when you do that, there's usually watermarks, there's usually some kind of in-app purchase that you need to do to really make it look like you want it to make it look. And so I think this highlight from later.com of just saying, like, use the different kinds of type presets and know that you can do that, I think you can make your Instagram story lit with what's already in there, right? And with what's already in there, you have the neon, you have the bold, you have those classic letters, right? The endless options are already inside Instagram. So you don't even need to go out and learn a different app. You don't need to go learn Illustrator. You don't need to go learn Photoshop. If you don't have those skills, you can just use what's inside Instagram already and mix those different types of type and create different hierarchies and really mess around with those and really play with those, right? Like you can mix the bold and the serif and the sans serif, and you can mix the colors. So I think that's a great tip from later.com, and it really encouraged me to kind of go off the deep end with typography, right? And expanding on this, with typography, right, there are a lot of glyphs. When you're in Illustrator or when you're in Photoshop or InDesign, you have the option of opening up a glyph panel for that entire typeface, right? And it shows you glyphs for different languages. It shows you different symbols that things are built in, right? Like this is, again, another reason to pay for like those features and pay for fonts, is because you'll usually get all of these glyphs mixed in. And things like Arial and Helvetica and sort of the standards and Times New Roman, they have plenty of glyphs in them too. And guess what? Your mobile device does as well. Right? If you go and hit that number icon on an iPhone, and then there's that other submenu, there's all those bullets and those fun like things that you can play with, and you can access those in your Instagram stories and actually turn them into design elements. Okay? Right? Like you can use that dot and you can make it huge and it'll hold its resolution, and you can change it color, change the color of it. And so I think that's an interesting thing. They use a tittle. In the later.com article, they use a tittle twice to kind of create this interesting groove wavy pattern that you would otherwise have to do in Illustrator, right? So again, back to this Gary V content model that we talked in the last episode. Once you have your long form taken care of, you can be so much more expressive in the Instagram stories. You can go to these other glyph menus inside your mobile device, and you can experiment with these different glyphs and make graphics out of them and experiment with a hierarchy and with the emojis, right? So I highly, 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 highly encourage everyone to kind of take one thing from today's episode and do it in your story. And I'm going to try to do it too, right? Like I'm going to try to push, now that I have a little bit more time on my hands and I'm just doing my account. I'm one less account signed in, right? I'm going to try to do some more visual stuff, and I'm really going to try this Gary V content model. I'm going to be posting all the later guides on my Facebook page. I might be posting stuff on LinkedIn. Actually, I will be posting stuff on LinkedIn. So look for that coming up in the future. Just more places to get the content, more types of content around these long recording sessions in hopes of getting more of an audience every week, right? Every week, I kind of want to get a little bit more of an audience around this. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. I hope and I wish you the best of luck creating Instagram stories. Thanks for listening to another episode of Creative Crunch. I'm going to get a drink of water so that I actually sound good. All right. Thanks for listening to another episode of Creative Crunch. I'm your host, Curtis Tucker. You can find me on Twitter at Curtis_podcast. You can find me on Instagram at Curtis. On YouTube at just search for Curtis Tucker. The links are probably somewhere else too to get linked back to my YouTube. I still don't understand how I'm supposed to help you find me on YouTube, but I am there. I'm live streaming there in its entirety if you want to catch all 3 hours, or in this case, 2 hours with video. You can do that on YouTube. Quick shout out to everyone that did tune into the live streams today on Instagram and on Twitter, as well as YouTube. I really appreciate that. We're doing it every Monday from like noon 15 to 2:30 in that window. We're live streaming on all those platforms. That's kind of the live content for the week. And then I'm going to go home and make some micro content to kind of feed you guys the rest of the week. Got to get that amped up. People have been responding to the Facebook messages. So I really appreciate that. Again, my name's Curtis Tucker, and this has been another episode of Creative Crunch. If you like something that you heard, tweet me about it. If you're listening on anchor.fm/Creative Crunch, send me an audio message. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review. Or if it's less than that, give me some constructive criticism. How can I get to 5 stars? What would make this better? Thanks so much for listening to Creative Crunch. We'll see you guys somewhere else on the internet. Bye. I just did a live stream. Go back and watch it. You'll learn how to make your Instagram stories better. Period. If you have any suggestions, at me. Gary V. Okay, right after. I just tweeted. Right after. Okay? Of course. Participating in polls. Okay. It's 2:20. Maybe I'll give Dallas some stuff. Or try to record some stuff for Dallas. How do I do that? Cyber suck. What do I do? Do this. Go hands-free. Hey, Dallas, Wyatt mentioned this morning that you make beats or music, maybe. Do you think if I recorded you some stuff, you could maybe make an intro for my podcast? Let me know what you would need in return. I'd also love to feature your music, too. Cool. Okay. So I'm just going to record some stuff for Dallas, or maybe just, I don't know, a Fiverr audio engineer. I don't know. I'm just going to record some stuff. 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 Why doesn't this change? I thought this was supposed to change it. Fuzz vocal. Fuzz vocal. I thought this was supposed to change it. 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 Why isn't this doing what I want it to do? Mute, solo, input monitoring. Why isn't this working? Huh. Damn it. Normally this makes it go. Normally this makes it go. All right, well, let's just record some stuff, I guess. There are no undo steps. Okay. Welcome to Creative Crunch. 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 Hello, and welcome to another episode of Creative Crunch. Creative Crunch, Creative Crunch, Creative Crunch. 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 Welcome to 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 Creative Crunch. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Creative, Creative, Creative. Crunch, Crunch, Crunch. Hello, and welcome to Creative Crunch. Hello, and welcome to Creative Crunch. Hello, and welcome to Creative Crunch. Welcome to another episode of Creative Crunch. I'm your host, Curtis Tucker. Welcome to another episode of Creative Crunch. It's Wednesday, so you know what that means. It's time for a new episode of Creative Crunch. Are you listening? Because it's time for another episode of Creative Crunch. You better be tuned in. It's time for another episode of Creative Crunch. Are your headphones plugged in? Is the volume knob cranked? Because it's time for Creative Crunch. 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 Are you tuned in? Is the volume knob cranked? Beep boop, beep boop, beep boop, boop. Can you hear me? You're tuned in to Creative Crunch. Welcome back to Creative Crunch. I'm your host, Curtis Tucker. Welcome to Creative Crunch. I hope you're sitting down because we've got a doozy of an episode for you. Are you listening? Are your headphones plugged in? Because it's time for Creative Crunch. Roll the intro. Roll the intro. Roll the intro. Let's roll that intro and get into another episode of Creative Crunch. Do you have your paints ready? Is the computer fired up? Are your headphones plugged in? Because it's about time for another episode of Creative Crunch. Creative, 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 crunch, 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 creative crunch, creative crunch, creative crunch, creative crunch, creative crunch. Welcome back to another episode of Creative Crunch. Welcome to another episode of Creative Crunch. Welcome to another episode of Creative Crunch. I'm your host, Curtis Tucker. Let's get right into it. Welcome to Creative Crunch. Art, design, music. Art, design, music. Be creative. Be creative. You are creative. So welcome to Creative Crunch. I'm glad you're listening. You better be creative. Are you tuned in? Welcome back. That's been another episode. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to another episode of Creative Crunch. We'll see you next week. Roll that outro. That was another episode of Creative Crunch. That was another episode of Creative Crunch. That was another episode of Creative Crunch. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week on Creative Crunch. That's been another episode of Creative Crunch. Quick shout out to everyone watching on the live streams Monday, 12 to 3 Mountain Standard Time. Quick shout out to everyone watching on the live streams. Thanks for tuning in on the live streams, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. Are you tuned in? Live streams every Monday, 12 to 3 Mountain Standard Time. Quick shout out to everyone watching on the live streams every Monday, 12 to 3. Be there, be square. Are you listening on anchor.fm/Creative Crunch? Then leave us an audio message and you might get featured in an upcoming episode. Are you listening on anchor.fm/Creative Crunch? Hey, are you listening on Anchor? Then leave us an audio message and it might get featured in the next episode. If you're listening on anchor.fm/Creative Crunch, share that profile. Tell your friends about us. Tweet about us. Get the word out. It really helps. Thanks for listening. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, leave a review. Creative Crunch is also available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, just a little bit of that. I don't know. Creative Crunch is also available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else that you listen. So plug in. Tell your friends about us. Thanks. You're listening to Creative Crunch. This has been Creative Crunch. Thanks for listening to Creative Crunch. We'll see you next week on Creative Crunch. I'm your host, Curtis Tucker. Get on me at the gram at Curtis. Curtis Tucker. Curtis Tucker. with your host, Curtis Tucker. Hosted by Curtis Tucker. Creative Crunch, hosted by Curtis Tucker. Creative Crunch, hosted by Curtis Tucker. Curtis Tucker, hosted by Curtis Tucker. Hosted by Curtis Tucker. Hosted by Curtis Tucker. With your host, Curtis Tucker. With your host, Curtis Tucker. Curtis Tucker. Curtis Tucker. Your host, Curtis Tucker. With your host, Curtis Tucker. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Curtis Tucker. Thanks for tuning in to Creative Crunch. I'm Curtis Tucker. With your host, Curtis Tucker. Do. I wonder what this sounds like. This is random information. Do. Do. Ba. A ba 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 da ba ba da ba ba da boo. A scoop ba be doo ba boo ba da beep ba ba doo. Dee dee da da doo. Da 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 dee da doo. A ski ska da doo ba ba dee ba hee ba da da doo. Da doo. Da doo. Da doo. Doo 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 doo. A skip ba ba da beep ba da ba be da boo. And da 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 zap ba ba da ma hama come doom. And this is Creative Crunch with your host Curtis Tucker. A Creative Crunch. This is Creative Crunch. Do ba ba boo ba Creative Crunch. Boo ba beep ba ba doo. Skida ba ba Creative Crunch. Adi da doo doo skada ba ba dee ba Creative Crunch. Beep-a-doo-bop, bop, scooter-bop, Creative Crunch. Scabba-doo-bop, beep-bop, boom, ba-da-moo, da-da-da-da-da, Creative Crunch. Woo-ba, beep-da-ba, ba-dee-bop, ba-da-ba, Creative Crunch. Beep-bop-boo-doo, keep-bop, ba-da-ma-da-ba-na-na, Crunch. Ba-da-ba-be-da-goo-doo-ba-doo-doo-doo, Creative Crunch. Beep-bop, ba-da, keep-bop, ba-doo, ba-da-doo-da, Creative Crunch. Skinny bop 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 buddy bop boo Creative Crunch. Beady meeny bop ba da bop bop ba doo bop beady ka. Buddy bop boo doo beep bop ba doo bop beeda bop bop ba. Buddy meet ba ba da beep bop boo doo boo. Ba doo bop beeda beep bop ba doo bop ba dee ba doo doo doo. Creative Crunch. Let's all listen to Creative Crunch. This is Creative Crunch. Welcome to Creative Crunch. How about Creative Crunch? What's your Creative Crunch? Nothing but Creative Crunch. Nothing but Creative Crunch. Nothing but Creative Crunch. Creative Crunch. What's your Creative Crunch? What's your Creative Crunch? Creative Crunch. Crunch, your Creative Crunch. This has been Creative Crunch. Thanks for listening to Creative Crunch. Creative Crunch. What's your Creative Crunch? Thanks for listening to Creative Crunch. leave downtown, walking around. All right, see you, YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Why does it still say I'm live when I don't want to be? It's not ending now.